Okay, we're live.
Awesome. So I'd like to call to order the special council meeting of Tuesday, July the 21st. Just before we get going, I'd like to acknowledge that we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The city of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that the presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. All right, so we have one item on the agenda tonight. So I guess first things first, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Councillor Hendricks?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In favor.
Item 3A, business items, City Hall reception area and council chambers. Ms. Bozahudak.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for this evening. Tonight, we're looking at addressing the pandemic components for the well-being of residents and staff at City Hall. During the pandemic, as the government of Alberta went through their relaunch strategy, Beaumont continued and administration created task force addressing many of the different components so that we could keep up to date and manage all the different requirements through AHS regulations. At this point in time, through this task force, we evaluated our facilities, and at the City Hall, there's three major components we were looking at and evaluating, and the principles that we did as we went through the design and walking through the vestibule area and our front reception, as well as council chambers. These principles were to reduce the risk to residents, to follow the direction of the provincial government and the chief medical officer, and to work to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of our city employees. Through this evaluation process, we looked at City Hall and the configuration of it to conduct in-person meetings. To do so, we actually did a placement and we did an alignment so that we could have 7 council members, 3 admin, 2 presenters, and a maximum of 6 public participants within that space. To do that, however, we have to look at the transmission guards, or what others call sneeze guards, between council chambers, seating areas, as well as our presenters. The other thing that we were looking at in that reception area, as we walk through the space, we wanted to make sure that when residents walk in, they're walking up to an area where they are protected from both our staff and protecting our staff as well. So we looked at, if you take a look at the diagrams and the conceptual drawing that we provided, we wanted to make sure that we had the separation and allowing flexibility to manage the 2 residents that would be at that location. In doing so, we looked at removing our existing millwork, replacing it with a new millwork structure, and providing security to that area by removing that grill that we have currently and providing a man door that accesses the lobby area into our staff and administration space. We also looked at how we approached our front reception or our front building, and that was taking away the push button mechanisms that we had at our entrance and removing that to what we call the wave technology. You'll see that a lot on the exteriors of building where we have, it's a motion sensor and that changes the mechanisms we require in that vestibule area. We then looked further and we looked at the hygiene in that space and the 2 washrooms that we have there. We wanted to replace that with touchless components. So again, fountain water or lavatory, and the toilets that would have sensor mechanisms, and we wouldn't have faucets being used, the handles on faucets. The last thing we looked at in that front was our wooden box that we have as a drop box. We want to replace that with a stainless steel, easily maintained and washed. In going through all of these components, we went through research and different schemes, as well as we maintained very simple, clean lines, mirroring very much what the BSRC looks like in the front when you go in through that space, that white, clean look on the front millwork. So we tried aligning those components with the City Hall. So tonight we were asking that and recommendation that council approve a capital project for the City Hall renovations in the amount of $145,300 with funding coming from the City Office Maintenance Reserve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Open it up to questions from members of council. I have one. So at one point we discussed not doing council chambers. Is there any reason we're advancing this project as of now?
With the council chambers, the reason why we weren't, it was the cost that came in and it was the design that was there. It was over $30,000. So what we did, and that was a design change, that it was clear view and bent system so that you'd be actually, a council member would be sitting and you'd have a U-shaped form around. We went to a aluminum channel and sleeve construction, which allows for cheaper and less expensive. That's why.
Okay, I guess
It was just it was too much money the first time. So that's why we were looking at a different setup, and we still need the separation between members, and we don't have that with our seating. So you still need that sneeze guard between the two when you're sitting side by side.
Okay, because at one point we were anticipating some relaxation of measures and not have to spend the money. So are we anticipating that, or are we now still anticipating, having to do that in order to get back in council in person?
At this point in time, with AHS, we're looking at the worst case scenario so that we don't have to delay and get back in. So I can't answer right now if it's going to relax or be more stringent on AHS standards. We're just preparing so that we can continue in with the public and getting us back into council chambers.
Okay. All right. So open it up to questions. Kathy, followed by Bill, followed by Steve. Councillor Barnard.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks for the explanation. A couple of questions. The first one is, you mentioned an evaluation of all of the facilities in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Could you speak a little bit more about that? Is this one, I imagine, is coming to us because it is City Hall? Are the others covered by their capital budgets, or what is happening there?
Basically, with all of the facilities we went through, we're using through maintenance. So in other words, CCBCC has already that protection around that reception area when you come through. With our other facilities, we'll be installing some other temporary glazing as well, or glazing systems, which will be in their maintenance budgets. So we have that covered. This is outside of our budgeting.
Thank you for that. And then follow up to where I think the mayor was going with his questioning. Is this temporary or is this permanent? Basically,
we've designed it so that if we have to take them out, we're going to be filling the wood with and resanding. So that's why we're going to a post. So it can be a temporary measure while we're in this AHS, but we've built it so that we can remove the post, fill them, and put varnish on them. So you'll see the screw holes, and then we fill them up with wood filler and sand them and varnish them.
So thank you. You're talking then specifically about the dividers between council members.
Correct.
And all of the other changes that you talked about, the washrooms, the reception area, those are permanent?
Those are permanent, correct.
Okay, thank you.
You wanted to weigh in?
I just wanted to build off of what Jennifer had said about preparing council chambers, and our initial thought, if you recall, was around $30,000 to do the change that Jennifer was talking about. And when we went to council, we agreed that no, let's just wait here and see what happens. And we can still do that. We unfortunately don't know what AHS is going to come up with as far as physical distancing. Big announcement today around schools that they're opening up under near normal conditions. So I'm still cautiously optimistic that by September, October, they're going to remove that physical distancing, but we don't know. So the question of, we want to get into these in-person meetings, and what Jennifer's suggesting is, in order to do that in August, we're going to have to put up these temporary measures in council chambers. Jennifer, I meant to ask you this earlier. What's the total cost piece of just the council chambers? Do you have that?
Yeah, we got that down to $4,200, and that's just the way we were doing our system.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to add that, Mayor Stewart, council.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Two quick questions, and I guess Mike mentioned my thought patterns there. So my understanding is that we don't have to do the council chambers at the present time, which Mike mentioned just a moment ago. So it's only $4,200. I get that, but I know with the school's announcement today, I'm optimistic as well that we'll be back in person in September or latter part of September. So I'm cautious to spend the 4,200 if we really don't need to on council. I'm more concerned with City Hall and the access that this proposal or this ask is going towards. So having said that, Jennifer, you mentioned in your presentation, the ask is coming from the reserve. Very two quick questions then. Will the reserve fully fund this request? And if so, how much is left in the reserve after this request is funded from that reserve? If you have a ballpark idea. If not specific, that's okay, but.
I can answer the one, it's fully funded from reserve. What's remaining, I can't. I can get back to you on that. With the reserve study that Mr. Dowler had presented, there were numbers that I have to actually verify, but I did confirm that everything would come from that reserve, so I can get back to the remaining for you.
Actually, you don't need to, Jennifer.
Okay.
If the ask is fully funded by the reserve,
Yeah.
that's sufficient for today.
Okay.
I was just curious at the top of my head if you knew it. If not, don't waste any time getting back to us on that, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart, for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Hendricks.
Oh, thank you. Just the entryway stuff and the touchless bathrooms and that kind of stuff. I see the need for that and support those changes. Question on council chambers: as you bring the potential solution together, I just want to point out as well that the camera in there, and if you start putting plexiglass in between councillors, and that plexiglass is not the kind that's going to let visibility through, then we're going to be losing half the face or half the body or expression or tone or all those kind of things, and the reasons that we're trying to have this on camera. So I would just implore administration to ensure we got the right kind of plexiglass in there that you can actually see through, and this solution be tested, and we not find out on the first night of council that we can't actually see half of anyone who isn't directly head on into the camera, which is everyone except the mayor. So yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hendricks.
Your worship, thank you. Just a few points. I'm in agreement with the front desk. Question on the two little chairs that sit in the foyer. I'm assuming they're gone through this process.
Correct. They are, as well as the table that was there. Yes.
Good stuff. And perhaps a permanent removal.
Yes.
Yeah, because I find that during council meetings and breaks, people are in that area and they're struggling to talk around those chairs and tables. So that's great. The modesty covers for the electronics that were part of the first rental when we reassembled the desks. I think there's two panels that still could be put in so that we don't see all the electronics when you look at it from the floor.
Okay.
I just always curious as to why we have the closet in the foyer. Always thought that if had that day back, the wall that backs onto that foyer would be removed from inside the chamber and pushed to the outside of the foyer to give us some more room, perhaps better usage of the space.
Okay.
Then the width of the desk, the actual council desk, back when it was originally used in the format it's currently in, you would have a CEO on one side of the mayor and the city clerk on the other. Of course, we've eliminated that, and now we've given John a fairly large desk to work from. But would it help if we condense that desk somewhat? John, what do you think?
It's all going to have to be in how it measures out, right? Because we still got to
because there's two extra spots there, and I'm just saying, like, in terms of how tight the chamber is to begin with, if that wouldn't help condense it a little bit. Yeah, so I think that's those are my questions, so thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Danlock, follow up or?
Yes, please. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead, and then the CAO and Ms. Raymond want to weigh in, so.
I'll let them weigh in first if they like. They may have a relevant point to what my next question might be, so it may save some time.
CAO, Ms. Raymond?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Stewart. I wanted to confirm something with Councilor Hendricks, if we could. With those 2 extra spaces, are you suggesting we cut those out and make that U smaller? Is that what your suggestion is?
Yeah, I thought if you tighten it up, it also helps with the camera
Mhm.
angle because you can't, Councillor Danilek, you can get most of him. and you know, and vice versa on the other side. So that would just tighten up the whole U for sure.
I'm seeing a lot of heads nod here looking at me. Is that something that we should go and get a cost estimate on then? That's a little bit bigger of work, not crazy dollars, as you know, but
No.
should we go out and get an estimate or just build that into our renos and see what we can do?
Yeah, I think if you had a finishing carpenter in for a couple hours, you'd have it finished. So it's
Okay.
it's not a great deal of work. So
Thank you.
and the modesty panels are the ones that would sit in front of the electronics.
Yeah.
And they'd be set so that they're hung. So if you have to pull it open to get at the electronics, you can still do that. But it would nicely tighten up the look on the inside of the chamber. So
Yeah, maybe worth considering. So just before we get into the second round here, I'm summarizing what I've heard from council is that we're okay with the renos to the front foyer and the doorways and the bathrooms. There's still some question up in the air about the renovations to the council chambers in terms of the plexiglass. Some are for it, some are against, and we might add to the scope a bit and do some millwork. That's what I've heard to date. So I think if council's good, we'll just unless somebody's really opposed, we'll continue discussion on the plexiglass and the millwork. Councilor Danilek?
Yeah, I guess my thoughts were just going to be asking Ms. Bozo Hudak, just that, if council were to delay a decision on council chamber renovations, if we decided, for example, the first Tuesday, our second Tuesday in September, our first meeting, that yes, we want to have the plexiglass and renovations, could it be done by the 4th Tuesday, which is our next actual formal council meeting, a 2-week period? What is this approximate window of construction for the council? Give us an idea what our flexibility would be if we decide to make that change. How fast could it happen if we decide making any change at all, please?
Okay, so the delay is going to be the supply and the ordering of the materials. Right now, the installation would take probably a day, not even day and a half for what we're looking at without the cutting of millwork. So just installation of the plexiglass. Right now, we're looking at a 4 to 6 weeks. If we're customizing some of our sizes, we've narrowed it down to 3 vendors that have given us a 3-week window, but that's pushing it a bit. So we've allowed for a 4-week for delivery of the material.
Okay,
That's
so
been the issue.
realistically speaking, then, if we made a decision to change council at a later time instead of this evening, it'd be a 4 to 6 week turnaround time for installation. So that's a reasonable time frame. Thank you very much.
So I guess that opens up the question, how badly do we want to get back into council chambers? Council Stout?
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to get back into chambers as fast as we reasonably can.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think we should, my view is that we should take the measures that Ms. Bozo Hudak has just suggested in the council chambers because they conform with the existing requirements. Yes, those might be relaxed at some time in the future, but we don't know when that is or even if that'll happen. And I think we've now got a good 6-week period in which we can get all this done. And one of the things I was going to ask is arising out of Councillor Van Nieuwkerk's question was that regarding plexiglass and some of the other concerns about the field of view and who's in and who's out and any changes that we might make to the millwork, is that could we just have, when all this work is done, I'd like to have a trial before there's an actual real live council meeting where we sit in our seats, we run the cameras and we check that everything looks the way it should and we modify it if it doesn't. But I'd like to have what shall we call it? A dress rehearsal. Let's
Yeah. May I further to what was mentioned about the visual and the cameras? I would just like to add, one of the things that we could look at, and the way we've designed it is with the council and the angles, we would just put the side panels up, and it's the presenters that would have the vertical. So we do have that option, and it would take away a portion of that camera disfiguration or change in light. So that does give us that opportunity as well. If we find that that trial run does indicate that we do have that change in visual, or the sounds off or something like that, that would be a solution to, instead of being a complete U-shaped around each of the council stations, that it's the sides the council stations would have, but the presenters would have the vertical because they're not on camera.
Mhm.
There are ways we could work through that.
Thank you. Okay, and yeah, so I'm in favor of going ahead with this right away, or as quickly as we reasonably can. Yes, I just also sit on the library board. The library board's just authorized the library manager to do a lot of the same things, and yeah, recognizing that 6 months from now, some of these measures may be redundant, but at the same time, I also think we should be setting an example. This is how you do it safely, folks. This is, public meetings can continue, and we're taking all the precautions that are necessary. And I think we need to demonstrate and show some leadership that we're doing that. So I'm completely in favor of this.
Thank you. Councillor Munkoff Swain, you had your hand up. But okay, no, moving on. Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Just to follow us, my earlier comments are more designed to sort of give us what our options are in terms of timing and costs and so on. But I do agree, getting back into council chambers is good for us as a council, for our community as well, and getting back to some idea of normalcy would be kind of nice. So I'm not going to push too hard to defer the idea on council. If council is comfortable moving forward with our renovations, having you ready for September for our meetings there, I'm be okay with that. It's just more a matter of looking what our options are. And if there's no real big concern to delay, I'm okay getting back in council as soon as possible for all kinds of reasons. So thank you.
Councillor Barnhart, follow up.
Yes, Your Worship, I'm also in agreement with proceeding now. I like hearing that it is temporary and it can come down, which I assume means it can go back up if we have a resurgence.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I would also like to suggest that I don't understand why we would have to have the plexiglass in front of us. We seem to be far enough away. So would that save us some money if we just did the side?
It's just the finishing of it. So yes, it would.
I
Sides are
would
good.
like to see that
Yeah.
adaptation.
Okay.
Okay, so seeing no further requests to speak, but I do think we have some consensus that we'd like the renovations to council chambers to go ahead. So just a quick nod, can we do this all in one motion, or do you want to break it into two, one for the foyer and one for the council chambers? All in one, thumbs up. Okay, so I'll make the motion that council approve the budget for the renovations as presented. And we'll go from there. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none? All
Nope,
in,
hang on.
sorry, Councilor Danlock?
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. I like Councilor Barnhart's suggestion of having just the side panels as opposed to the front.
Okay.
I think the recommendation had the front panels in it, so I'm not sure if to amend the motion, or we just simply agree to the fact that we'll have just side panels only, just so we're clear.
I don't think we need to get quite to that level of detail. Administration's heard what we're sort of after. If we give them the budget, they've heard what we want, so they can get it done.
I'm fine with that. Thank you very much.
Councilor Hendricks?
I thought we were voting.
So did I. Okay. Any more discussion on the motion? All those in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Councilor Munkoff Swain?
He's on the phone.
Yeah.
His chat said in favor.
His chat did say he's supportive of moving ahead with the recommendation in favor.
I see that now. Okay, in favor, that carries unanimously. We're all good. And so that brings us to the conclusion. CAO, you got the direction you need, Miss Jennifer. Jennifer, you got what you
Yes.
need?
Yes.
Okay, so unless there's anything further, we will adjourn the meeting and continue on with summer break. Thanks very much, everybody, for making time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.